Identification, assessment and measurement of risk. Part A. Discuss the relationship between organisational strategy and risk management strategy. Risk is a condition where there is a possibility of dispersion from expected possible results of an activity, for example fundamental risk, particular risk, speculative risk, pure risk, etc. While framing organisational strategies, risk is one of the key components which needs to be discussed thoroughly by the Board of Directors to make sure that they are within the limits of organisation risk appetite. Though the word risk suggests that stakeholders should eliminate risk completely, but elimination of risk completely may not be always possible and optimal. Managing the risk could be the better approach. For managing the risk, organisations have to manage the expectation of risk with different shareholders. Organisational strategies are also likely to be influenced by interests of different shareholders and their attitude towards risk management, such as shareholders, customers, employees, governments, regulators and debt providers. Part B. Develop a framework for risk management and establish risk management systems. Since risk management plays an important role in an organisation's strategy, there should be a process for risk management. There are many different approaches which can be adopted. One of the risk management approaches, which is consisting of most common elements, could be described as below. 1. Set responsibilities. 2. Set risk appetite. 3. Identify risks. 4. Assess risks. 5. Respond to risks. 6. Monitor and review the process and adapt if necessary. 7. Start again. The Board has the overall responsibility for risk management as part of its corporate governance obligations, but these responsibilities can be delegated to line management or separate risk management functions such as a risk committee. A risk committee could be set up by the Board, and the tasks of this committee will depend on the organisation, their industry, their size and complexity. Common tasks for the risk committee are to set the risk policy, assess risks, review internal credit work, review the risk register, advise the Board, and ensure that the risk system exists. Parts C and D. Identify and evaluate the key risks and their impact on organisations and projects, and distinguish between strategic and operational risks. There are two key risks for any organisation. Strategic risks are risks that are related to the fundamental long-term decisions that the Board of Directors takes about the future of the organisation. This is the most significant risk, considering it will impact the survival of the organisation in the long term. For example, changes in technology, market or industry, and sector, product or competitor issues, macroeconomic factors, issues with commodities, capital availability, and failure to innovate. Operational risk is the risk of loss from a failure of internal business and control processes, and will affect day-to-day operations of the organisation. Reasons for operational risk could be internal control deficiencies, human error, fraud, business interruption, or loss of key personnel. Part E. Assess attitudes towards risk and risk appetite and how this can affect risk policy. Risk attitude is the Board of Directors' view on the level of risk which they deem desirable for the organisation. Different organisations have different attitudes towards taking risk, which depends on the capability and willingness of taking risk. Risk appetite can be described as the nature and strength of the risks that an organisation is prepared to bear. Two factors that need to be considered while defining risk appetite are the level of risk which the company's director considers feasible and the capacity of the company to bear the risk. Part F. Discuss the dynamic nature of risk and the ways in which risk varies in relation to the size, structure, and development of an organization. For the risk management processes, the key question is to decide at what frequency any risk management process should be assessed. Best practices in corporate governance recommends an annual review of risk management processes and controls to ensure effectiveness. However, considering the dynamic nature of our surroundings, chances of risk arising abruptly is very high, for example, period of economic uncertainty or pandemics, and it may lead to more frequent reviews than decided. If we consider the size, structure and development of an organization while deciding the risk review frequency, it will require that risks should be managed as frequently as it is possible in any situation, considering the impact which it can have on the organization. Part G. Recognize and analyze the sector or industry specific nature of many organization risks. Usually risk can be categorized into two types: strategic risk and operational risk. These risks can be split further. Strategic risks can be divided into business risk and non-business risk. Business risk contains product risk, environmental risk, stakeholders risk, and investment risk. Non-business risk comprises financial risk and event risk. Operational risks contain information and IT risk, compliance risk, wastage risk, reputation and ethics risk, fraud risk, health and safety risk. We can analyze the risk for below sectors which they face in day-to-day operations. Financial institutions face reputation risk, fraud risk, and technology and IT risk. Nuclear power sector faces reputation risk, compliance risk, wastage risk, and health and safety risk. Alcoholic beverage sector faces reputation risk, political risk, and compliance risk. Mining industry faces reputation risk, political risk, health and safety risk, wastage risk, and event risk. Part H and I. Assess the severity and probability of risk events using suitable models. Explain and assess the ALARP, ALARP, as low as reasonably practicable, principle in risk assessment and how this relates to severity and probability. Risk maps display risks in a visual way by plotting them on a chart according to their impact and likelihood. It can be in the form of a chart or graph using risks from the risk register, and each series of risks can be plotted on this map in order to decide on the best way to manage them. Normally it has one axis for severity or impact and another axis for frequency or likelihood. Approaches to managing the risks should vary according to their position on the risk map. The acronym ALARP means as low as reasonably practicable, and is the principle of a rational approach to managing the risks that seeks the most appropriate response to any risk by balancing cost and benefit. For organizations whose core business are with high risk likelihood and high consequences, they cannot avoid the high risk. They have a pragmatic approach which value trade-off between cost and benefit by implementing various control systems which are appropriate for the level of risk faced. For example, if businesses are of high risk, then acceptability of risk should also be high, and similarly for low risk with low acceptability of risk. Part J. Explain and evaluate the concepts of related and correlated risk factors. Related risks are risks that are connected because the causes of the risk are the same. For example, risk brought about by economic uncertainty, or cause of risks are interlinked. Correlated risks are two risks which vary together. Positively correlated risks exist when they increase or decrease together, for example legal risk from being sued and the associated reputation risk. Negatively correlated risks exist when one risk will increase and another will decrease, and vice versa. Correlation coefficient can be used to manage the strength of relationship between the two risks.